So one of the things that post-tribbers or pre-tribbers say about post-tribbers is that we teach it Jesus is a wife beater. Boy, that's annoying when people talk about how Jesus is a wife beater. Let me just ask you, was Jesus beating his wife in the first century when the apostles were killed, when people were being martyred? Was Jesus beating his wife? Was Jesus beating his wife during the Inquisitions? Was Jesus beating his wife throughout history, Baptist history? When you hear about all the blood that has been shed throughout church history, was that Jesus beating his wife? Is Jesus beating his wife? Was he beating his wife in times when wars were taking place and people were suffering? Was Jesus beating his wife when Christians died in earthquakes and when Christians died of diseases? Was Jesus beating his wife when people died of COVID? Was Jesus beating his wife when churches were being persecuted during COVID and churches were being forced to shut down and getting fined? Was Jesus beating his bride through all those things? No, those things were all tribulations. And in the post-trib world, we believe that the 6 seals are the tribulation. And in Matthew 24, it says, after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon shall not give her light. That is the 6th seal. The events after that are God's wrath. That is the doctrine of the post-trib crowd. All the things before the sun being darkened, moon turned to blood, these are not supernatural events. These are not the locusts coming out of the earth. This is not fire and brimstone following. It's Antichrist making war with the saints. We've got wars, famines, pestilences, earthquakes. You've got the martyrs. All of these things have been happening throughout history. And I believe in a future time when it's going to escalate, but I believe that God's people will be here during that time. I believe we will be removed before the trumpets and the vials. I believe that is when God is pouring out his wrath. So, Jesus is not a wife beater. He never has been a wife beater. But the devil, he loves to persecute God's people. He loves to persecute the bride. The devil definitely likes to beat up on God's wife. And so just understand, he has been doing that, and he will continue to do that until Jesus comes and removes us from this earth. So don't accuse post-tribbers of teaching Jesus as a wife beater. That's ridiculous. Also, we get accused of teaching people to look for the Antichrist rather than Jesus Christ. Now, that's absolutely ridiculous, because just because we believe the Antichrist is going to come first does not mean we are violating passages about looking for that blessed hope. I'm getting ready to travel to Louisiana. When I start heading to Louisiana, you know where I'm heading? Louisiana. But you know what I'm going to start doing on that trip? I'm going to start watching for signs for Missouri and for Tennessee, I think, and for Mississippi, and then Louisiana. And I know one thing. I will not see Louisiana before I see Mississippi. I will not see Louisiana before I see Missouri. These are things that I have to go through before I can get to Louisiana. But Louisiana is what I'm looking for. That is my destination. That is what I'm heading for. That is the purpose of this trip. And understand, the focal point of my life is Jesus Christ. You better believe I am looking for Jesus Christ. You better believe I'm looking for that blessed hope and glorious appearing. But I believe that the scriptures teach that there are some things that we will go through before that happens. But do I want to see the Antichrist? No. But I have to. Do I want to go to Missouri? No. But I have to get to Louisiana. I wish I could just jump the state, but I can't. That's just part of it. That's what just happens to be in between me and Louisiana. And I believe there are some things that are between me and the coming of Christ, but that does not mean I'm not looking for Jesus Christ. So don't accuse post-tribbers of not looking for Jesus Christ. You better believe we're looking for Jesus Christ. Another accusation is that our theology, being post-trib, will cause people to sin and live in sin. I just listened to a Baptist preacher recently saying, if I believe in post-trib, I'd just start, living for the world and living for myself. And, then when I see the Antichrist come on the scene and start, doing this thing, then I'd get right with God. Well, that's a pretty sorry attitude right there. So you're only doing right because you're afraid Jesus might come back and catch you not doing right? Do you not think he can see you right now? That's really your only motivation. I thought we were supposed to serve him because we love him. I thought we were supposed to serve him because it's the right thing to do. Now, there's so many reasons that's ridiculous teaching. Okay, first off, that wouldn't work anyway, because I do believe when he comes, he's going to find people sleeping. It is my belief that if you are not living right now, you're not going to live right when things get difficult. If you have run with the footmen and they wearied you, what are you going to do when the horses come? So I personally believe expecting a coming time of trouble and tribulation causes Christians to strengthen themselves. Those who think that the grid's going to go down one of these days, what do? They prep themselves. They try to learn how to live off the land, and how they try to learn survival skills so they'll be ready when it goes down. Well, people who believe we're going to go through a coming tribulation, and people like myself, I'm always like, man, I need to make sure I stay in shape, spiritually speaking. Because if I'm not going to be a witness now with no persecution, what makes me think I'm going to be a witness when there is persecution? If I let little things now stop me from serving God, what am I going to do when my life is being threatened? So you know what? It motivates me to strengthen my Christian walk. And it motivates me to get closer to God. I'm not going to wait until, things are horrible before I get close. I'm going to get close to them now. Why? Because when these things all happen, it's going to happen quickly, and I want to be ready. So your opinion is that it would cause you to live lasciviously, which I'm worried about that. You concern me greatly. What about that law of God written in your heart? What about the Holy Spirit? Is the Holy Spirit going to let you live that way and it not bother you? I don't know. That doesn't set well with me. But in my opinion, if we're just going to throw opinions out there, I think the post-trib theology motivates people to get their act together. Because if we can't do it while things are good, we're not going to do it while things are bad. So that doesn't work. Another thing we get accused is stealing people's blessed hope, or taking away their blessed hope. Well, I don't want to take the time to go through Titus chapter 2, because I want to try to do this quickly. But I encourage you to read all the book of Titus, but even just chapter 2 starts out telling the aged men how to live, the aged women, the young men, the young women how to live. It's all about behavior. And you want to know a theme that you see throughout the epistles and in the book of Acts? Those people wanted to be found at Christ's return living godly and righteous lives. They, even though they were saved, even though they had imputed righteousness, they were not satisfied with that. They also wanted to be righteous themselves. The Apostle Paul said that I might attain to the resurrection of the dead. He said, not that I have already attained, but he said he had a goal to apprehend that for which he was apprehended in Christ. What does that mean? Well, we have all received imputed righteousness. We have the righteousness of Christ, spiritually speaking, legally speaking. But Paul actually wanted to practice it and live up to it. And those early Christians, you can see it in Paul's epistles. They had a desire to live for the Lord. And when Christ returned, they wanted to be found living for him, doing right, with their act together. That was their mentality. But what is it that prevents us from that? It's this flesh. This flesh is what prevents us from that. But one of these days, when Christ returns, we are going to see him, and we're going to be like him. And then we will have that new and glorified body where we won't sin anymore. A lot of Christians today, they're comfortable with their sin. Early church was not comfortable with their sin. And their blessed hope was that one day they were going to put off this tabernacle, and they were going to put on that new one that was in righteousness, that wasn't a vile body. Their blessed hope was the new and glorified body. Beloved, now are we the sons of God, but it doth not yet appear what we shall be. But we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is, and every man that hath this hope in him purifieth himself even as he is pure. Those who are looking for the coming of Christ understand one of the things they're excited about, their blessed hope, is that when they see him, they will be just like him. And because we know we're going to be like him, We're purifying ourselves right now. We're trying our best. You know, our goal as a Christian, God's going to change all our bodies. Okay? No matter what you do, God's going to be changing your body. But it ought to be our goal and our desire that as little change as needed as possible. That should be the goal of every Christian. We will be like Christ one of these days. It's going to happen if you're saved. But right now, your goal should be as little change as possible when Jesus returns. And you better start that process now. You don't wait until the tribulation starts. And so that was their blessed hope back then. Now it's an imminent rapture. Okay? But nowhere in Titus is it teaching imminency. Is it promising an imminent return? No. This is about the new glorified body. That's what the blessed hope is. And so another thing we get accused of is teaching that we're going to get raptured right back up and then just come right back down. We're going to meet Jesus in the air and come right. We're not even going to go to heaven. That was said in those videos, that it basically does away with the rapture because we're being raptured to Armageddon. I don't know anyone who teaches that. Okay? Again, in the post-tribulation world, the tribulation is not 7 years. If I ask you, okay, I'm talking to pre-tribbers now. If I ask you, where do you get 7-year tribulation? You're going to go to Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9 doesn't even use the word tribulation. Where we get the word tribulation, we see that word used in Matthew 24. So that's fine. If you want to associate the word tribulation with end times events, that's fine because it's used in the scriptures in relation to end times events. But how is it used? Now, in every one of your Clarence Larkin based charts, you have tribulation, and then you got like an arch, and then it goes to abomination of desolation, and then you've got another one for another 3.5 years, great tribulation, right? Going to Armageddon. But what does Matthew 24 say? After the tribulation of those days, the sun should be darkened, the moon should not give her light. That's the sixth seal. That is the sixth seal. There is no timeline given in Matthew 24. None whatsoever. So you're from those words, after the tribulation of those days, or after the abomination of desolation, there should be great tribulation. Where do you get the 3.5 years from that? You're assuming that. Okay? That is an assumption, but it is not explicitly stated in scriptures. And so understand, we still have time in the post-trib rapture teaching to go up to heaven, be judged, and all the things that pre-tribbers think. It's just going to be a short amount of time, but I think we're going to be able to squeeze it in there. I think we'll be able to get all those things, everything you think is going to take place in heaven before we come back with Jesus. We still have time for it in the post-trib world. So, sorry about that, but that's a bad argument. Okay? Another thing people will say about our side is you're divisive. Okay? Now, that's possible. Okay? I try not to be divisive, but understand, being divisive does not mean our doctrine's wrong. Being divisive means just being divisive. Okay? And sometimes post-tribbers probably are divisive. Sometimes pre-tribbers are divisive. I've never heard of a post-trib church kicking out a pre-tribber, but I've heard of a lot of pre-trib churches kicking out a post-tribbers. So who's being divisive? Okay? Now again, we all take shots at each other, I'm sure, but that's just being divisive. Okay? That's not related to the doctrine. Okay? It sounds like you want to demonize the crowd as a way to distract from the subject matter. Because you can be right and still be divisive. Just like you can be wrong and still be divisive. So, I'm not going to necessarily say that accusation is not true. I'm just going to say it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because it doesn't prove right or wrong. I can throw the same thing at you guys. So, another accusation that I get thrown, especially at myself, this one gets thrown my way, is I'll get called a preterist. I got called a preterist last week. Okay, now, if you want to call me a preterist, first off, can you even tell me what preterism is? All right, can you give me an accurate definition, representation of what preterism is? And now, can you also tell me why preterism is bad? What makes preterism bad? I believe there are some very bad heresies in preterism. I believe it is heresy to deny a literal future resurrection from the dead. I believe that's heresy. I believe it is heresy to deny a literal future return of Jesus Christ. I think that's heresy. Okay? But at the same time, there are many things that preterists say about other things that might be true. Okay, that I might even agree with. There's some things they say about 70 AD that I might agree with. But these days, you say 70 AD preterists, okay, you can't just say a word and then like that just takes care of everything. That's like when somebody says Trinity and you say Catholic. Somebody says virgin birth, deity of Christ, Catholic. Wait, no, why is Catholicism bad? They're not bad because of their teaching on the Trinity. They're not bad because they're teaching on the virgin birth. Okay? They're bad because of their work salvation. They're bad because of just their system, their pope, their priest, things like that. That's why they're bad. So you doing that, you're just trying to put an ugly label on somebody to shame everyone else away from their position. So don't just call me a preterist. You tell me, you call out what I believe that you feel aligns with preterism. And then let's talk about that. Because what a lot of preachers will do, they'll get, them preterists out there, they don't believe in a literal return of Christ. They don't believe in a literal resurrection of the dead. My Bible says if Christ is, there is no resurrection of the dead, then is Christ not risen. My Bible says that too. Here's the problem. I don't agree with the preterists on that. I think they're dead wrong on that. And so you'll say all these things about the preterists, and you know what else? Them preterists, they like to talk about 70 AD. Okay? They like to talk about 70 AD. I heard Pastor Tommy talking about 70 AD the other day. He's a preterist. Well, hey, it's not wrong to talk about 70 AD. There's some significance of things that happened during that time. He's going to stuff outside the Bible to talk about, when it comes to his doctrine. No, I'm not. Okay? Just because I reference a historical event, even pre-tribbers will acknowledge the fact that Matthew 24 talks about the destruction of the temple, and everybody agrees that happened in 70 AD. Oh, now you're talking about 70 AD, now you're a preterist. Hey, it's not wrong to talk about 70 AD. That's not wrong. So let's stop with the nonsense. Let's go to what I am saying that aligns with some things preterists say, and let's talk about the merits of that. And so again, if I'm talking about the Trinity, I don't want to waste my time talking about Catholics and popes and priests. We're talking about the Trinity. But if you just want to deny that, you want to avoid the subject of the Trinity, what you'll do is you'll distract by talking about Catholics. And that's just dishonest. So